Autumn 1914. The opening shots of the Great War had already scarred the continent. The German Schlieffen Plan, a lightning-fast strike through Belgium to knock out France, had been halted, but just barely, at the Miracle of the Marne. What followed was a desperate, bloody scramble northwards, towards the English Channel. Both the Allied and German armies tried to outflank each other in what became known as the Race to the Sea. This race wasn't about capturing vast territories. It was about securing the vital channel ports. If the Germans took them, they could sever Britain's lifeline to its army in France. The race would end in a small, unassuming Belgian town, a name that would soon be etched into history with blood and iron. Ypres, the British Expeditionary Force, or BEF, was at the heart of this struggle. A small but highly professional army. They were famously, or perhaps infamously, dismissed by the German Kaiser as a contemptible little army. The soldiers of the BEF, in a classic display of British defiance, adopted the nickname with pride. They became the Old Contemptibles. These weren't conscripts. They were career soldiers, many of them veterans of colonial campaigns. They were masters of their Lee Enfield rifles, capable of firing 15 aimed rounds a minute, a rate of fire so rapid that the Germans often mistook it for machine gun fire. This was the force that stood in the way of the German army at Ypres. The First Battle of Ypres began on the 19th of October, 1914. It wasn't a single, clean engagement, but a chaotic series of brutal, overlapping battles fought in the mud. Forests and fields around the Ypres Salient. A salient is a bulge in the front line, a piece of land that juts out into enemy territory. It's a nightmare to defend, as it can be attacked from 3 sides at once. But giving it up was unthinkable. Ypres was the last major Belgian town not in German hands, and it held immense symbolic value. More practically, it anchored the entire northern flank of the Allied line. Losing it would mean disaster. The German command, under Erich von Falkenhayn, was determined to break through. They threw everything they had at the thin British line. This included not just their regular army corps, but also a wave of new reserve corps, filled with young, patriotic, but barely trained student volunteers. These raw recruits were hurled against the seasoned rifles of the BEF in what the Germans themselves would later call the Kindermord bei Ypern, the massacre of the innocents at Ypres. They advanced in dense formations, singing patriotic songs only to be systematically cut down by the professional marksmanship of the British. The fields of Langemarck were littered with the bodies of Germany's youth. Despite these horrific losses, the sheer weight of numbers began to tell. The German attacks were relentless. They pounded the British positions with a storm of artillery fire, far outnumbering the British guns. The BEF was stretched to its absolute breaking point. At one stage, the line was so thin that cooks, clerks, and engineers had to be thrown into the trenches to fight the fighting was savage and intimate. At Polygon Wood, Gellivelt, and Messines, men fought with rifles, bayonets, and grenades in desperate hand-to-hand combat. The fighting at Gellivelt Chateau on October 31st was particularly critical. A massive German assault broke through the British line, and for a terrifying moment, it seemed the road to Ypres lay open. The situation was saved by a single battalion, the 2nd, Worcesters, who launched a desperate, near-suicidal counterattack that plugged the gap just in time. It was a moment of incredible heroism, but it came at a terrible cost. The pressure was unrelenting. The men of the BEF endured days and weeks of constant shelling, sniper fire, and massed infantry assaults. They lived in hastily dug trenches that were often little more than waterlogged ditches. The autumn rains turned the battlefield into a quagmire of thick, clinging mud that clogged rifles, buried the wounded, and made every movement an exhausting struggle. Sleep was a luxury, a hot meal, an almost forgotten memory. Nerves were shredded by the constant noise and the ever-present threat of a sudden, violent death. One of the most famous stands of the battle took place at Nonneboschen, the Nuns' Wood, on November 11th. The elite Prussian Guard, The pride of the German army launched a final massive assault, aimed at smashing through the weary British line once and for all. They advanced through the morning mist, their disciplined ranks expecting to brush aside the exhausted defenders. They were met by a storm of fire. What was left of the Old Contemptibles, their ranks now desperately thin, poured out that same rapid, accurate rifle fire that had defined them. The advance of the Prussian Guard faltered, then broke. It was the last major German effort of the battle. As winter set in, the fighting gradually died down, the front lines solidifying into the static trench warfare that would characterize the next 4 years. The First Battle of Ypres was officially over. By November 22nd, the Allies had held the line. Ypres was saved, and the Channel ports remained secure. From a strategic perspective, it was a defensive victory, but the cost was catastrophic. The BEF, the original professional force of 160,000 men that had crossed the Channel in August, was effectively destroyed. It had suffered over 54,000 casualties, killed, wounded, or missing. The officer corps was decimated. Entire battalions were reduced to a handful of men. The Old Contemptibles were gone, sacrificed to hold the line in the mud of Flanders. The British army that would fight the rest of the war would be a different beast entirely. A mass citizen army of volunteers and later, conscripts. The legacy of First Ypres is twofold. It's a story of incredible resilience and professional skill, where a small army stood against overwhelming odds and refused to break. The stand of the Old Contemptibles bought Britain and its allies precious time to mobilize their vast resources. But it's also a story of immense tragedy. It marked the end of an era of warfare and the bloody baptism of trench warfare on the Western Front. The ground around Ypres would be fought over again and again, in a second and a third battle, becoming one of the most feared and bloody sectors of the entire war. The names of the men in Gate Memorial in Ypres today, over 54,000 of them, with no known grave, stand as a silent, powerful testament to the sacrifice of the men who fought and died in the salient. Starting with that first, terrible battle in the autumn of 1914, they held the line, but at a price that still staggers the imagination. Thank you for watching. If you found this history compelling, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories from the past. Every subscription helps us continue to bring these important events to light. We'll see you in the next one.